We cannot ignore the possibility that some regulatory practices may inadvertently impede business activities. The World Bank maintains an ease of doing business index, which Kenya has been steadily rising in. You will not be surprised to note that some of the key measures implemented which allowed Kenya to make business easier was getting rid of certain fees and bureaucratic practices, many of which had existed from the 1980s and 90s. Upon examination, it was discovered that regulators often imposed fees, even nominal fees ones, as low as 1,000 shillings for issuing certificates, often merely as a procedural formality. However, the administrative expenses incurred in collecting such amounts, including maintaining infrastructure and staff, sometimes surpass the total revenue collected. It is evident that this scenario is not unique and likely extends across numerous regulatory agencies. The agencies must consider the ramifications of their actions and procedures on the economy and the ease of conducting business. In today's global landscape, efficiency and economic competitiveness are paramount. Therefore, it is imperative that our agencies adopt a mindset that prioritizes alignment with these principles. Our policies must be dynamic, responsive to the needs of our society, and aligned with international best practices. Similarly, our legal framework should provide clarity, consistency, and enforceability to enable these entities to fulfill their respective mandates effectively. Our regulatory authorities and agencies are confronted with several challenges that impede the execution of their mandates. These range from bureaucratic inefficiencies to resource constraints, from regulatory capture to technological disruptions. The hurdles are enormous. During the meeting of the National Development Implementation Committee, where we work again closely with the head of public service, in which the principal secretaries present today would have attended, we touched on the EACC report and template, and it was agreed that each state department would establish a corruption prevention committee. Now, this is very serious because you have to report back to the head of public service and be very deliberate. Confirm that you have set up these committees. Give him the names of who are in those committees so that it is not just a verbal communication. Let it be very clear that you have done so. And the way the PSS did it, PSS are the ones to chair those corruption prevention committees in their ministries. We would expect the CEOs of all the regulatory authorities to also chair that particular committee so that we can deal with this corruption issue. The headlines we have been seeing are not good for us. They are not good for the country. It becomes awkward when some of our key development partners are citing this as an issue that is obstructing very strategic agreements that we want to enter into. So please, let's look at that area very, very effectively. I challenge all the agencies to do the same, that is, establish a corruption prevention committees and institute measures geared towards wiping out avenues for corruption in line with the lessons contained in the EAC report and template. Agencies must not be dens of corruption or rent-seeking. They must carry out their core mandates effectively and in the national interest. As an indication of the magnitude of the problem, for instance, the manufacturing sector, where institutions such as the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the National Environmental Management Authority, NEMA, and the Departments of Weights and Measures all assert their authority over aspects such as labeling and inspection. This overlapping mandate often leads to confusion and inefficiencies for businesses striving to comply with regulatory requirements. Let me give another example. The food and beverage processing industry faces a similar challenge, with regulation spanning across multiple entities like NEMA, county governments, the Kenya Bureau of Halal Certification, and the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Services, KEFIS. Even in the crucial area of waste management, the jurisdiction is shared between county governments and NEMA, adding another layer of complexity to compliance efforts. In the financial sector, there exists an overlap among regulatory bodies like the Capital Markets Authority, the Insurance Regulatory Authority, and the Sacco Societies Regulatory Authority, SASRA. Consolidating their functions under a unified framework would undoubtedly enhance the collective impact and streamline regulatory processes. In the realm of intellectual property protection agencies, such as the Kenya Industrial Property Institute, KIPI, the Kenya Copyright Board, and the Anti-Counterfeiting Agency, all play distinct yet interconnected roles. By harnessing their expertise within a consolidated framework, we can eliminate redundancies and foster a more efficient system for safeguarding intellectual property rights. In the aviation sector, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority is responsible for overseeing various aspects of civil aviation, including safety oversight, air navigation services, and aircraft registration. However, within this domain, other entities, such as the Kenya Airports Authority and the State Department of Transport, also hold significant regulatory roles. While the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority focuses on safety and regulatory compliance, Kenya Airports Authority manages airport infrastructure and operations, where there is often a duplication of efforts and conflicting directives. Furthermore, there is an element of uncertainty in some quarters with regard to which of these entities should oversight training schools, given that their roles are cross-cutting. I am aware that on account of the regulatory environment in aviation, we now have a situation where businesses prefer to have their aircraft serviced in Uganda and as far as Egypt, thus denying Kenyan businesses the opportunity. On this one, I can even emphasize that we have a situation where I have personally witnessed a situation where the Kenya Air Force, which actually boasts of the best engineering people in aviation, are struggling for more than a year to actually get a maintenance license. Kenya Air Force being taken in circles. That speaks volumes. My intention here is to provoke you to research online using available technology and infuse global best practices into our local regulatory environment. And I can tell you that the head of public service will not approve certain travels because they end up on his desk. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express appreciation to the head of the public service for taking the lead in streamlining the regulatory authorities and agencies. And in this, I was telling him that to the best of my reflection, and I've been around government for some time, I cannot recollect when regulatory authorities, in particular, were convened to have this kind of dialogue. There are usually other convenings, but this one is a unique one, just focused on the regulatory. I also want to commend the head of public service for one very significant move. The powers of the Inspectorate of State Corporations had been curtailed for 7 years. Remember that. Remember the 7 years of Egypt. Because the previous administration had not facilitated the appointment of the State Corporations Appeals Tribunal, a necessary tool to give effect to the surcharge mandate of the Inspectorate. Under the guidance of the head of public service, tribunal members and the chairpersons were appointed, and the Inspectorate now has the power to surcharge. This power to surcharge is a critical tool in the war against corruption. 7 years. Just imagine. 7 years. People, by design, just making sure an entity of government is rendered dysfunctional, deliberately. As we speak here, as I talk about 7 years there, try and reflect, you as a regulator, if you go into your archives, how long have you taken to dispense with a decision that is required so that a business decision can be made one way or the other? Have you had it for 7 years? Have you had it for 5 years? Have you had it for 3 months? This is a time for us to look at ourselves internally. And don't say, I'm looking at you because I'm pointing a finger at you. If you know there is something like that, this is a time for you to reform yourself. It turns out that the biggest public debt or pending bills, the largest constituency, is the parastatals constituency, which holds about 83% of the pending bills in the economy. So we all know. And he was very harsh. So let us not let him down. Let us not let the people of Kenya down. Let us pull together. Our policies must be dynamic, responsive to the needs of our society, and aligned with international best practices. Similarly, our legal framework should provide clarity, consistency, and enforceability to enable these entities to fulfill their respective mandates effectively. Our regulatory authorities and agencies are confronted with several challenges that impede the execution of their mandates. These range from bureaucratic inefficiencies to resource constraints, from regulatory capture to technological disruptions. The hurdles are enormous. The rapid pace of change in technology, finance, and healthcare sectors poses unique regulatory dilemmas that demand innovative solutions. Moreover, lack of coordination and coherence among regulatory bodies sometimes leads to duplicity of efforts and wastage of resources. This is a state of affairs that cannot be allowed to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to propose some recommendations to address the issues at hand during our deliberations. One, enhanced coordination. We must foster greater collaboration and coordination among regulatory authorities to ensure coherence, reduction of redundancies, and facilitation of information sharing. Secondly, capacity building. Investing in the capacity building of the regulatory personnel is paramount. Continuous training programs, knowledge sharing initiatives, and exposure to best practices from around the globe to empower our regulatory workforce to navigate complex regulatory landscapes with confidence and competence. Third, regulatory reform. Agencies ought to embrace regulatory reform initiatives to streamline processes, reduce regulatory burdens, and promote regulatory efficiency. Fourth, embracing technology. Leveraging technological advancements such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, and big data analytics to enhance regulatory oversight, enforcement, and compliance monitoring. Fifth, stakeholder engagement. Fostering meaningful engagement with industry stakeholders, civil society organizations, academia, and the public at large, soliciting feedback, addressing concerns, and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability to enhance regulatory legitimacy and public trust. In my role as Prime Cabinet Secretary, collaborating with the Chief of Staff and Head of the Public Service, I undertake to highlight and give prominence to this very noble campaign of revitalization and re-energization of our regulatory authorities. In my extended mandate as the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, I undertake to designate an officer to work with the regulatory authorities on best global practices that will enhance visibility and ensure optimal performance, leading to stellar service delivery to the people of Kenya. We must also look at ourselves. There are other uncompetitive trade practices, transfer pricing. We have a situation where within the financial services, there are some people who may look aside when people deny Kenyan investors an opportunity and they get into a transfer pricing mechanism with a foreign investor. Rather than investing that money here, they want to take it away through unfair trade practices. The regulators must step forward and deal with this. We have a situation where we here maybe have been complicit in creating monopolies. Monopolies are not good for an economy. Monopolies are not good for pricing. Monopolies make life expensive for the ordinary citizen. Some of us here have been delaying competition. You have made it extremely difficult for competition to move forward in this country because you are protecting a particular player. So you are giving him an advantage of becoming a monopoly, and you have the chance of inviting competition. Competition is what will bring prices down. So as regulators, are we complicit in giving an undue hand advantage to one or two players and denying proper competition in our economy? And if we deny competition, investors run away. We don't create the jobs that we should be creating. So, can we also have an opportunity to inwardly look at ourselves in those matters? Am I sitting on a mining license for too long? And in the process, you're not allowing competition in the mining sector. Am I sitting on facilitating people in a blue economy and therefore making it difficult for others to come and process and invest in the blue economy to provide competition and jobs because I'm hoping to give an advantage to somebody? These are the fundamental questions that we ought to ask ourselves as regulators. And I'm sure if we answer ourselves honestly, we shall be able to transform this country in the direction that the President wants. I had the opportunity to accompany His Excellency the President, Dr. William Ruto, to a state visit in India. And we happened to be sharing a table with him and the Prime Minister Modi and the Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Minister responsible for infrastructure and all that space, the two of them. We then had a conversation with the Minister responsible for infrastructure, and he made some revelations that were both shocking but amazing. He said that in the last 10 years of Modi's leadership, they had been able to add another 40,000 kilometers of electric rail to the Indian infrastructure. 40,000 kilometers of electric rail. I was shocked. And in the process, he said they are ready to share with us their applications, some of the things they use in their technology to handle the issue of way leaves. Maybe it's already with the Ministry of Transport, I don't know, but if not, the Indian government is ready to give us this on a pro bono basis. Because way leaves, for instance, which was referred to by both the head of public service and the governor of Mombasa, we have a problem when it comes to how do you deal with the way leaves for roads, power, sewer, you name it. Fiber optic, they converge. And we all know what happens. When they converge, people come at different times. They dig a hole or a trench, they disappear. Another one comes, digs another one, disappears. And there's no coordination. And then others are harassing the Ministry of Lands. I saw Nixon here telling him that we have not been compensated. So they said they have a way of having, once you input the data, you are able to focus and quickly capture where the way lifts are, and from there, you can make a forward attempt, divert that, and avoid this expense of compensation, which we know was the primary cost escalator in our own railway construction in this country. So we have an opportunity. We can do it. And it means that regulators must talk to each other, including the county government.